Cops of Reddit, what is the most suspicious thing you've ever caught somebody doing for a totally legitimate reason? There's an old penitentiary in the middle of the city here. It was to be deactivated and it finally was shut down by the governor. People got used to that building being empty. But for some bureaucratic reasons, they had to reopen it again, temporarily. That means holding bad people in again, and even though the neighbors weren't happy about it, they didn't think much of it, since it was temporary. Anyway, it is a building very close to the road, to residences and commercial buildings. It's not a huge place, but it has tall walls built somewhat like a fort, or a castle. Then one day, I wasn't even working, I'm driving by the street behind it and I see 4 people rappelling down the fucking wall. They weren't doing it each on their own rope, they were doing it in the same rope, and it looked a whole lot like that Hollywood scene where the prisoners escape down the sheets rope. This was in the middle of the day too, noon I think. I had to go around, find a place to park my car and observe. I called in HQ and asked if the old penitentiary was still open and just get its status. While I did this, I got to really see what they were doing, and it didn't look like escapees anymore. It turned out to be graffiti artists hired by the state to paint that big wall facing the houses. Only part of the building was reactivated and this wall was on the deactivated wing. The graffiti artists were assessing something. This was 3 years ago. There's a cool painting on it now. I'm still glad I didn't have to chase 4 inmates that day. Hearsay story from a family friend who was a sergeant in a major West Coast city. One of his new officers was late for roll call one night. After about 45 minutes, sergeant gets a call from another station asking if he was the sergeant for the missing officer. Hilarity ensues. Apparently, the missing officer was getting ready to leave his apartment for roll call for the night shift. As he walked out to the stairs, he sees a guy in a ski mask hop through his neighbor's window. Cop radios the burglary in progress and runs back to his apartment to get his shotgun. When he gets back to neighbor's house, he heard a female screaming and the sounds of a struggle. Cop announces himself, kicks open the front door, runs to the kitchen and sees what he thinks as ski mask guy sexually assaulting the neighbor. The neighbor sees cop with shotgun screaming at ski mask guy and she completely freaks out. Turns out ski mask guy was neighbor's boyfriend, husband, doing some sort of role-play fantasy at neighbor's request. At least nobody got shot, and apparently, the cop was known thereafter as Officer Cockblock. I find so many suspicious vehicles in our National Veterans Cemetery in my jurisdiction. They almost always turn out to be Pokémon goers. Recently I was conducting a S18 house search on a guy we'd arrested in a local club with loads of drugs on him. In his room I found an oversized, out-of-place, vase with false flowers in them, suspicion raised. I take the flowers out and in the bottom I saw what I believed to be a balaclava. Here we go. I took it out, unfolded it, and it turned out to be a jumper for a small dog. I look in the vase again, I see a blue velvet drawstring bag. I manipulate it slightly and it rustles, with the feeling of lots of little packets inside. I remove it slowly, open the bag, and inside are some retro Scrabble pieces. The fuck? We didn't find any further drugs in his room. We did however find a big fuck-off sized machete under his mattress wrapped up in a tea towel, so that was interesting. Still confused as fuck about the contents of that vase though. My cousin is a cop and told us the story of seeing a car driving slowly at about 3 a.m. through a neighborhood that had had several break-ins. He thinks to himself that they're looking for a target, so he puts on his lights and pulls them over. He walks up and the driver puts the window down and she turns to look at him with fire in her eyes and says, in a harsh whisper, "This had better be important because I just got the baby to sleep." He looks in the back and there's a baby in a car seat, sound asleep. The memory of what it was like when his babies wouldn't sleep rushes back and he says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry." "Never mind," and goes back to his car. She drives away slowly. He's just glad he didn't wake the baby. Prior U.S. Coast Guard. We were doing a security boarding on a vessel planning on entering port with some hazardous cargo. Me and one other guy are in the engine room, making sure everything is kosher, when we catch a glimpse of some boots barely sticking out from under a piece of machinery. Since, as far as we knew, all crew were present and accounted for above deck, we were understandably concerned. We radio up asking about it, get told all present and accounted for up above. So we're thinking stowaway or someone being smuggled. Luckily it was neither, just a dude who legit fell asleep while doing some maintenance. He shared a name with one of the other crew, so that's how we missed his absence. Apparently they our guy up above checked the same guy twice. Go figure. I am the suspect in this situation. I lived in a large town in the south of the UK in my own terraced house. Outside my house was a bus stop, so it had a few people who go by outside each day, but it wasn't in the heart of the high street. I had suffered from cluster flies for a few days and they came out of nowhere. We are talking maybe 50 or so, which is a little alarming, but there was nowhere I could see they were coming from. I got rid of them as quick as they came about and went about my day as normal. One day at the weekend I had a knock at the door with riot police who stated they believed that someone had died in the property and they were able to enter under an emergency act of law without a warrant. In their wisdom they spoke to the neighbors about who lived here after a report from an elderly lady visiting the bus stop. The neighbors mentioned my ex-girlfriend who they didn't see for a few months. We broke up and she moved out, but the police put the flies report and this fact together as me being a killer. The police were sure I had something to hide as they instantly didn't believe I owned the house. I work in IT, so make good money and am thankful I saved hard to get on the housing ladder, but they weren't having any of it. I had to then wait under surveillance while my house was searched and riot police all in the street. I am a keen gardener and upstairs in the airing cupboard I was attempting to grow some from seeds. The police were convinced that 23-year-old me was instead running a cannabis factory. In the end they found no dead body and they realized their mistake when I pointed out the 50 cacti around the house they conveniently didn't notice. I'm sure I'm on some kind of list now, but they left almost disappointed that their amazing detective work found an IT nerd that likes spiny flora and not the next serial killer. At around 2 a.m. on a weeknight, I see a guy bolt from a house in a quiet residential burglary hotspot. His face is covered, he's wearing sunglasses or something similar and the kind of dark clothing you catch burglars in. As I follow him and start to shout up on the radio, the cars parked between us clear to reveal he is running behind the tiniest dog I've ever seen, a clearly uncontrollable pooch that is having the time of its life. I just kept going. My husband told me a story of one time when he was patrolling around and he spotted a guy who was in a straitjacket come round the corner of town that he was patrolling, instantly suspicious. He ran over and grabbed him and asked him what he was doing. He said he was just messing around with it with a friend, but he lost his friend and can't get out. So my husband asked to call his friend just in case, and lo and behold he wasn't even lying. Up here, well, technically military really. I'm an officer with the Portuguese National Republican Guard, similar to the French gendarmes. We're generally responsible for policing rural low-population areas, though we do also take on some military expeditionary roles, like our peacekeeping presence in Timor. The point is, if you live in rural Portugal, we're the ones who are going to come when you need help or have trouble. About 2 years ago there was a murder. Old man was stabbed and bled out in his kitchen. The wife came home to find him dead lying in the counter. She called 112 911 equivalent, and I was dispatched along with some colleagues. Paramedics confirmed the death on site, but we didn't want to move the body before the judiciary police could have a look and do forensics. Not only that, but the old lady wasn't doing so good with the shock, so after about 20 minutes of her hyperventilating we got her in the ambulance and paramedics took her to the hospital. That means me and my colleague were left guarding the body and trying to keep things as we found them, while still looking around for evidence. About an hour later we hear a truck arrive. My colleague goes up from the basement where we were, but I stay longer to have a better look around. Come back up 10 minutes later to find the body gone. I look outside and see two guys shoving it into the back of a non-descriptive refrigerated truck. I come out running and yelling with my gun out, thinking the murderer was back and trying to cover their tracks. My colleague steps out from behind the truck. Turns out the morgue's vehicle was broken, and they were using a rental to transport the bodies. The two guys I saw were morgue workers just putting the body in the truck to carry it to the morgue, while my colleague was talking with a third. The judiciary police only came about 2 hours later. Cop here too. Nothing major, but one night I come across a pickup truck parked behind a small business, backed up to the dumpster. Guy is next to the truck emptying out trash from the bed of the truck and throwing it into the dumpster. Figured it was someone illegally dumping their crap in someone else's dumpster to avoid having to go to the landfill. Make contact with the guy who says he owns the business and that he is renovating his home but ran out of room in his dumpster there. He comes back listed as the contact keyholder for the business and the truck he was driving was registered to the business, so it was all good. Not exciting, I know. Cool cop here. I work midnights and one night I am sitting in my cruiser at like 2 a.m. doing paperwork. I see an older model car driving slowly around the area and then pull into an abandoned parking lot and black out in the corner by the woods. No lighting. This is for a building that is being torn down. This is not normal. So I'll look into it. I pull up to him and get out. How are you doing? I asked. What's going on in this parking lot tonight? He's got bags full of something in his back seat and he's alone. He's an older guy and he seems a little off. He tells me I am here to feed the cats. I think to myself that this is a bullshit answer and attempt to call his bluff. Okay, where are the cats? Then like 40 cats come running out of the woods. The guys asks may I? I say sure. He gets out of the car and starts feeding the cats. Dry food from his bags. The closest thing I can describe it as was the scene in Ace Ventura where his pets all come out of hiding. Okay, go on about your business. I guess, and I left.